Find your rhythm again, a meditation for the overworked soul. You are lying awake in the dark, and a silent, heavy ache is pressing against the back of your throat, born from years of spending your best daylight hours executing purely utilitarian, administrative, or practical chores. Your inner life is carrying a quiet grief over a stifled voice, a heavy impression that your authentic creative spark or artistic calling has been completely buried under a mountain of daily economic obligations. Right now, there is an exhausting internal fragmentation behind your eyes, a deep sense of invisibility that treats your unexpressed talents as if they were completely wasted or non-existent. The atmosphere in your sleeping space is crisp, carrying the clean, dry scent of aged bamboo shavings, the subtle aroma of a burning tallow oil wick, and the absolute muffled hush of a steady winter snowfall descending outside the low window panes. The support beneath you provides an unmoving, steady foundation, offering a sanctuary that demands no public performance, no artistic output, and no creative justification from your tired spirit. Your fingers are resting open, yet they might feel empty, holding the phantom weight of an instrument you never had the time to play, or a melody you were forced to leave behind in the rush of the town. The inner resonance of your spirit is not permanently ruined or silenced, simply because you have been forced to prioritize survival for so many seasons. This current state of artistic unfulfillment is not a sign of failure, but the natural consequence of a world that requires you to act as a solid, practical barrier instead of a vessel for song. Tonight, there is no requirement for you to prove your talent to an invisible audience, and there is no obligation to immediately produce a masterpiece to validate your existence. Your internal chamber is not a dead, solid block of wood. It is simply a seasoned culm, waiting in the complete shade for the right season to sing. Nothing will be forced into expression before its time, and your capacity for beauty remains entirely intact within the quiet margins of this room. The intellect functions under a painful paradox, believing that to protect its creative fire, it must constantly achieve a specialized public distinction or display its output for the praise of the marketplace. We treat our quiet, silent years as a dangerous stagnation, a personal failure that must be overcome by constantly striving for external accolades and physical proof of our genius. Yet this continuous striving for artistic distinction is the very mechanism that transforms a beautiful calling into a state of chronic, exhausting alienation. This is the surprising insight that Buddhist wisdom offers to a heavy heart. The real emptiness we experience does not live within the absence of public art, but in our internal resistance to the silent, hollow spaces of our actual existence. We spend our lives trying to fill the interior chamber with noise, completely unaware that true wholeness functions like the slow seasoning of a wild bamboo flute, where value is achieved not by forcing a melody, but by allowing the internal space to become perfectly clear, empty, and spacious. Perhaps you have felt this specific sorrow too during the late hours when the demands of the office are finally quiet and the unplayed music of your youth echoes like a ghost through the mind. It is a unique kind of loneliness, this feeling that your real identity is completely hidden from the people who interact with your outer shell every afternoon. If it feels right, let the physical density of the body settle completely into the unmoving support beneath you, allowing your spine to unburden its weight against the bed. You do not need to resolve the long-term direction of your artistic journey tonight, and there is no obligation to justify your creative path past the quiet margins of this bed. The vast midnight holds the valley without needing you to carry its weight, and the darkness does not require a demonstration of your genius to grant you its shelter. In a short while, we will travel down to a small valley cottage where an old craftsman demonstrates how a rough piece of timber must sit in dry storage for winters before a single placement of a breath hole releases its latent melody. For now, let these spoken cadences exist as simple markers along the perimeter of your room, asking nothing from your analytical intellect but the permission to let the structural tension release its grip. Right now, your physical form is simply breathing in the stillness, and that is fully sufficient to re-establish your own sanctuary in the night. The mind may continue to replay the monotonous receipts, the practical responsibilities, and the admin tasks you managed since dawn, but the body is only interested in the immediate air that is currently moving through this specific square of space. Each breath is an unhurried arrival, a cool drop of nourishment that does not ask how many songs you wrote or what creative projects you failed to launch. You might notice how the breath does not care about your artistic resume, never wondering if it should accelerate its rhythm to prove its productivity to an audience. It simply fulfills its natural purpose, clearing the center of your chest and then departing quietly without leaving a single trace of performance behind. If it feels comfortable, bring your attention to the brief, silent pause that occurs at the very end of your next exhalation. In that tiny clearance before the new air returns, there is a total absence of labor, a small sanctuary where no talents are being judged and no creative identities are being defended. You do not need to leap across that quiet gap to secure your place in the artistic world, for the earth will hold its rotation without your active input. The analytical tools are laid down, and the boundary of the day has closed its gates, leaving you with the simple reality of your own presence. Perhaps you can allow the speed of your thoughts to match the slow, heavy descent of the winter snow outside. There is no need to resolve the unexpressed potential of your life tonight, and there is no obligation to find your creative voice to earn the comfort of the dark. The raw bamboo does not apologize to the forest for being silent in the shade, as it simply allows its internal fibers to dry and become strong. Let your awareness slide into that same quiet permission, leaving the external metrics to fade into the shadow, while you remain securely anchored in the unhurried stillness of this frame. The structural transformation of a hidden potential often occurs in the deep cold of a long winter, long before any external melody is released into the air. Down in a narrow fold of the mountain valley, where the heavy frost collected early on the low thatch roofs, a small timber workshop sat nestled tightly against the gray stone cliffs. The air inside this workshop was constantly dry, smelling sharply of sweet bamboo shavings, the clean, bitter scent of aged sap, and the soft charcoal heat from a low clay hearth. A middle-aged town clerk named Taku had spent decades working in the crowded municipal office, his hands permanently stained with the cheap blue ink used for copying property deeds, commercial permits, and tax receipts. He carried a heavy, silent ache in the center of his chest, a persistent sorrow over an authentic creative voice that had been completely suppressed by the unyielding routine of his daily obligations. He could not stop replaying the thousands of monotonous numbers he had registered, feeling a profound internal unfulfillment, believing that his survival had cost him his entire spiritual identity. Every evening, while the office lanterns were extinguished, he felt completely invisible, his true artistic calling hidden away like a forgotten relic under a mountain of paperwork. Seeking a quiet space away from the relentless ledger books, Taku walked through the deep snow until he reached the valley cottage of an old retired instrument maker named Master Ren. Ren was a person who moved with absolute stillness, his shoulders relaxed beneath a coarse wool vest, his palms rough and polished from winters of scraping raw timber. He did not engage in the long philosophical discourses of the town temples, spending his days solely preparing the thick, wild bamboo culms that were gathered from the upper ridges. Resting upon his low work table was his primary meditation anchor, a curved steel scraper blade, its iron surface dark and worn down by decades of hand-shaping the tough exterior bark of the mountain wood. The tool carried no ornate decorations and no special status marks, yet it remained completely balanced, its sharp edge tracking the natural curves of the timber with mathematical precision. The visiting clerk sat down on a low straw mat near the hearth, watching the master select a rough, unpeeled green stalk that had been harvested from the mountain 3 winters prior. Taku expected the old man to immediately begin drilling the finger holes or cutting the mouthpiece to create a functional flute, since the town collectors often demanded rapid production and immediate proof of utility. Instead, Ren held the curved steel blade lightly in his right palm, resting the green stalk against his knee, and began to scrape away the rough outer skin with a slow, regular hiss that filled the quiet room. The rhythmic sound of the iron against the dry wood cut through the cold air, landing in the silence of the snowfall like a steady, unhurried breath. The old maker did not accelerate his pace when the wind rattled the paper screens, and he did not pause to check how many pieces were remaining in the corner. He simply followed the line of the wood, letting the steel blade peel away the dark surface imperfections, while leaving the deep hollow center completely untouched by the tool. The young clerk approached the bench, his ink-stained fingers touching the cool, raw surface of the exposed grain, feeling the immense density of the timber before it had been given a voice. Taku asked the craftsman how a human being could preserve their creative fire when the daily routine forced them to remain completely silent and unproductive for so many decades. Noting that his own life felt as empty as a dead piece of firewood, he wondered if the soul would not grow permanently numb from spending its best years executing basic, repetitive tasks, rather than producing beautiful melodies to show the world its worth. Ren did not set down the curved steel blade, nor did he look up at the rows of completed instruments hanging from the ceiling beams. He rested the iron edge against the side of the bamboo, letting his breath settle deep into the center of his abdomen, allowing his weight to be carried fully by the solid floorboards. He spoke into the crisp air, his voice low and clear, matching the steady cadence of the snow falling outside the window panes. He said that a stalk that believes its value lives only in the sound it makes will always find its peace at the mercy of the player, for its mind is constantly fighting the silent winters that make the fibers strong. He explained that the curved blade brings insight because it does not rush the internal hollow space, as it knows that the silence of the wood is a necessary seasoning, not a sign of death. The real suffering happens only when we treat our quiet years as a wasted void, forgetting that the highest transformation occurs when the interior chamber becomes perfectly clear, empty, and spacious before the first breath ever arrives. Taku looked down at the smooth surface of the scraped bamboo, watching the old man's thumb trace the fine lines of the grain while the fire glowed yellow in the dark. A sudden, quiet recognition entered his chest, cutting through the exhausting loops of his professional anxiety. He saw that he had been treating his practical life like a cruel prison, believing he had to display an extraordinary public masterpiece every afternoon to prove his existence was valid. The creative numbness he carried was not a sign that his spirit was broken, but the friction of his intellect trying to escape the silent, uncarved rows of his actual life, instead of allowing the inner vessel to mature in the shade. The old master lifted the iron scraper once more, guiding it smoothly along the ridge, letting the weight of the tool reveal the clean wood beneath the bark, without a single drop of force. He noted that a person who knows how to hold their own presence through the quiet seasons can preserve a foundation that never cracks. For the baseline of awareness requires no public song to be whole. But the young clerk had yet to discover how a small chunk of dark beeswax could heal the rough, hidden blockages within the deep interior nodes of the heart. Right now, as you listen to the steady hiss of the scraper blade in that mountain cottage, you can allow the unfulfilled expectations of your own creative journey to rest exactly as they are. You do not need to produce a grand artistic masterpiece tonight to deserve the complete protection of this room. The unexpressed potential you carried was real, and the silent grief it left behind is a natural weight on a tired spirit. But your internal space is fully capable of holding the quiet without losing its essential depth. If it feels right, let your breath move smoothly through the center of your frame, honoring the physical form without asking it to resolve every creative conflict before the morning arrives. The space around your bed is completely unconcerned with the public accolades you failed to achieve this afternoon. The walls are quiet, the darkness is steady, and your breathing form is perfectly complete without the illusion of an extraordinary artistic status. You might notice how the night does not demand that you present a gallery of finished works, offering the exact same quiet shelter to your stifled heart as it does to the seasoned bamboo stalks in the valley outside. There is no requirement to settle the direction of your talent before you are permitted to let your eyes close, for the current hour is only interested in the weight that is currently sinking into the bed. Let the loops of the office fade into the shadow, leaving you with the simple, heavy reality of this immediate rest. This reflection on the young town clerk uncovering the value of the raw bamboo stalk is not an invitation to turn your heart into a cold, mechanical piece of wood. It does not seek to transform you into an isolated stone, completely disconnected from the warmth of human aspirations, or the natural desire to express your authentic creative voice. The wisdom found in the architecture of the simple mountain workshop points toward a completely different kind of emotional freedom. The primary difficulty we experience in our daily labor is often just the initial movement of a routine chore, a simple realization that the immediate task is practical and unadorned. The true exhaustion begins when we try to build a massive mental resistance within our own chest to escape the present moment, creating an internal strain that warps our entire sense of security. The core suffering does not reside within the fact that our time is consumed by survival, but rather in our internal insistence that we must instantly manifest a visible masterpiece to prove our worth. We layer a heavy weight of chronic dissatisfaction over our natural capacity for presence, causing our individual structure to tremble under a load it was never meant to hold. When we discuss attachment in the stillness of this evening, we are describing that specific mental reflex that demands we find our identity only in the absolute validation of our artistic peers. It is the tight, heavy sensation in your chest that insists you cannot be personally safe until your talents are recognized by the marketplace. Craving becomes that desperate late-night urge to force a creative output, treating a normal period of practical execution as a dangerous sign of your own absolute failure. We believe that if we can just produce enough external evidence of our genius, the structural bond of our life will remain secure. Buddhist insight gently reminds us that forcing your own spirit to act as a specialized machine, without recognizing the fluid nature of your actual presence, always results in a fragile existence. True harmony relies on the independent depth of your own internal space, resting securely within its own boundaries. Mindfulness is simply the capacity to stand firmly on your own ground, without automatically reaching out to fight the passing routine of the day. It is the quiet act of observing a monotonous receipt or a repetitive administrative task, without deciding that you must immediately alter your own internal state to escape it. When we notice that all human environments are inherently shifting and constantly changing, we realize that the mechanical requirements of our labor are not hostile forces meant to destroy our voice. They are merely temporary textures, sustained only because we refuse to allow the empty spaces within our frame to remain clear. Letting go does not mean you abandon your creative voice or stop opening your mind to future projects. It means you finally recognize that leaving a healthy clearance between your true well-being and your daily title is the only way to keep your own structure standing. Your internal space functions as the wide mountain sky that holds the cottage workshop without being compressed by the weight of the cliffs or the movement of the tools. It is the vast field within you that can feel the boredom of another routine chore, yet recognizes that the external demand does not dictate the physical reality of your own value. Compassion is the willingness to look at your own tiredness without wanting to chide your frame for feeling empty in a demanding room. It is the understanding that you cannot truly provide a sanctuary if your own center has been completely dried out by the constant pressure to be extraordinary. The old craftsman did not reject the green bamboo for being silent in the corner. He simply respected its growth enough to let the steel blade clear the surface without forcing the wood to sing before it was seasoned. When this realization settles into the breath, the way you sit within your own skin changes fundamentally, introducing an unshakable sort of safety. The mind stops acting as a desperate calculator trying to secure every temporary room with the fragile glue of constant artistic sacrifice. You begin to see that the darkness outside your window does not require you to justify the path that brought you to this bed. The night is simply vast, quiet, and completely unconcerned with the records you have been trying so hard to balance since dawn. The weight of the original routine or the unexpressed potential was a singular condition, a silent texture that moved through the afternoon and left its mark on the calendar. Yet the mind continues to drag the heavy loop over the same cold space, thinking that if it processes the regret enough times, it can melt the sense of internal compression away. This constant internal friction is where the second layer of pain takes root, transforming a temporary delay into a permanent condition of worthlessness. The teachings invite you to lift the heavy analysis from the path, allowing the warmth of your own presence to soothe the margins of your tiredness without demanding an immediate resolution from the world. You are allowed to carry the history of your labor without allowing it to dictate the volume of your breathing tonight. As the quietness of the hour deepens, the urge to manage the metrics of your life begins to lose its grip on the chest. You can feel the natural stability of the body returning, a solid alignment that has nothing to do with public acclaim or the long-term changes that are absent from this room. The darkness around your bed is not waiting for a perfectly successful creation, and it does not keep a ledger of the melodies you failed to release. It simply offers an open space where the pieces of your day can settle onto the earth, leaving your awareness free to rest in the baseline of this immediate reality. You might notice how the support underneath you holds your physical frame without demanding a performance, providing the exact same reliable foundation regardless of your creative history. The tension in the muscles is allowed to widen and dissolve, letting the quiet current of the night carry your awareness away from the heavy demands of the town. If it feels right, allow the heavy architecture of your shoulders to drop downward toward the support underneath you. Giving up the rigid posture you maintained throughout the daylight hours, you might bring your awareness to the clear, rhythmic passage of the room's air as it enters the body, moving naturally without any deliberate steering from your mind. There is no requirement to strain or to regulate the depth of this inhalation, as the mere act of observing its current cadence is fully sufficient. Perhaps you can trace the cool, clean sensation at the back of the throat, followed by a softer, warmer release that returns quietly to the surrounding room. With each unhurried exhalation, you can invite the muscles of the jaw and the lower back to unburden themselves, letting the features of the body become spacious and completely unjoined. As you sit within this clear perimeter, a specific thought about an unexpressed potential or a heavy feeling of unfulfillment may present itself to your focus, seeking to occupy your internal space. Do not fight the presence of this thought, and do not attempt to construct a defense against it. Instead, you might gently give this internal pattern a simple title, perhaps calling it the silent season or the uncarved wood. Observe how this mental movement creates a subtle tightness across the chest, a physical impression that feels like a dense, unpeeled stalk resting heavily in the dark. If it feels comfortable, imagine placing this precise worry into the form of a raw, uncarved bamboo branch, letting the thick green walls hold the entire structure of that creative anxiety. You do not need to cut the holes, and you do not need to force the wood to produce a sudden sound. Simply see this individual piece of wild timber standing securely on the heavy stone floor within your awareness, remaining completely distinct from the moving thoughts around it. Watch what happens to the internal image when you step back by a small measure, allowing a narrow gap of clear air to open around the perimeter of the unpeeled bark. The bamboo structure does not need to vanish from your vision, for it is entirely permitted to remain there, catching the dry winter air without pressing against your ribs. Even noticing the rise of the pattern is enough to begin the softening. You can return to this spacious posture whenever you are ready, but right now, your only role is to serve as the silent space that allows these elements to remain separate. There is no urgency to force a profound emotional transformation, or to clear every lingering sense of artistic unfulfillment before the hour ends. The weight of the town's chaotic performance is allowed to sit outside your perimeter tonight, leaving your physical frame unburdened and your breath completely your own. As the borders of this internal landscape clarify, we follow the path further down into the low workshop, where the art of simple presence takes on an even deeper rhythm. Right now, your body is simply matching the natural drop of the snow as it finds its place in the soil below the porch. There is no need to mend the entire direction of your life before you are allowed to rest, and there is no obligation to fix the environment to earn the comfort of the dark. You might notice how the mattress receives your weight without asking which unfulfilled dreams brought you to this room. offering the exact same steady foundation to your body, regardless of your historical movement. Even a small pause between your thoughts is enough to let the internal compression settle completely, allowing the mind to coast to its own natural stop. Perhaps you can allow the remaining tension in your hands to release, letting the fingers curl naturally against the fabric of the bed. You are no longer holding the handles of the writing tools, and you are no longer responsible for maintaining the efficiency of your history against those who are absent. The night has taken over the management of the valley, covering the deep cliffs and the heavy workshop in a blanket of absolute stillness. Let your awareness slide into that same quiet sanctuary, trusting the immediate current of your breath to carry you softly into the deep spaces of the night. Deep within the upper drying lofts where the raw bamboo blocks aged in the complete shade, the air always carried the rich scent of ancient wood resin, cold soot from the central flue, and the heavy winter dampness that clung to the uninsulated roof timbers. A woman named Mira had traveled up the mountain to find work in the storage barns, her mind entirely occupied by a bitter, crushing belief that her life had been permanently wasted in administrative chores. For many seasons, she had served as a low assistant in the town registry, copying infinite manifests and tracking cargo shipments. While her own artistic voice remained completely buried and unexpressed, she carried a profound internal resentment toward the traveling musicians who stayed at the local inns. Believing that their freedom was a luxury she had been unfairly denied by the harsh demands of survival. Every night, while the mountain winds howled through the high rafters, she lay awake on her thin mat, her heart tight with a painful sense of unfulfillment, desperately searching for someone to blame for the silent years that had stolen her creative youth. The keeper of these shadow-filled lofts was an elder nun named Sister Shanti. Shanti was a person who moved with absolute silence, her steps barely registering on the worn floorboards, her face calm and lined like the gray limestone cliffs outside the high window. She did not lead the formal chanting ceremonies in the temple, spending her afternoons solely examining the internal nodes of the hollow culms to ensure they dried evenly without splitting. Resting beside her small charcoal heater was her primary tool of internal adjustment, a small, dark chunk of natural beeswax, its surface scarred and reshaped by years of being pressed into the rough joints of the wood. The wax carried no artistic polish and no decorative worth, yet it remained completely pliable, holding its essential properties through every freezing mountain draft. One evening, a fierce freezing mountain storm swept over the ridge, blanketing the valley in a blinding wall of white ice that made it impossible to descend the trails. The temperature inside the loft dropped sharply, creating a bitter, crackling frost that threatened to split the delicate timber, and forced several stranded porters to huddle near the center flue, their voices rising in sharp, nervous complaints about the bitter cold. Mira sat on a low storage chest, her fingers clamped tightly around the edges of her wool wrap, feeling a severe surge of her old internal compression. As the external anxiety of the room pressed against her ears, she felt a powerful urge to slam the wooden shutters or to yell at the demanding travelers, believing that any sharp reaction was better than sitting quietly in a freezing room, where her internal unfulfillment felt so incredibly cold and heavy. She watched the old nun, and wondered how anyone could preserve a calm center when surrounded by a harsh environment that seemed to reduce every creative spark to a basic battle for warmth. The old woman did not try to silence the complaining porters, and she did not offer words of false comfort to the stranded guests. She sat down calmly on the floorboards before a long, cracked bamboo tube, picked up the dark chunk of natural beeswax, and began to work the material between her fingers with a slow, steady, down-to-earth rhythm. The regular, soft scrape of her thumb against the cold wax cut through the tense murmurs of the room, landing in the chilly air like a calm, unhurried breath. Shanti did not accelerate her movement when a guest complained loudly about the lack of firewood, and she did not pause when the frost thickened on the window panes. She simply felt the rough, internal nodes of the hollow wood, applying the soft wax to smooth the internal blockages, while leaving the true length of the chamber completely open to the air. The visiting assistant watched the nun from her seat on the chest, the tight grip on her wool wrap gradually loosening. As the steady rhythm of the smoothing process filled the dark loft, a small, subtle internal shift began to occur within her chest, arriving not as a sudden release from her difficult circumstances, but as a completely new way of relating to her unexpressed voice. She saw that she had been treating her years of administrative labor as if they were a permanent rot that had ruined her capacity for beauty, entirely unaware that the old nun's tuning lived in her ability to clear the hidden blockages without demanding that the wood produce a sudden song. Mira took a long, steady breath, letting the clean, dry scent of the aged bamboo shavings settle into the base of her throat before she moved. For the first time in many winters, she did not look at her rough hands to count the years she had lost to the registry office. She stood up, walked slowly across the cold floorboards, and quietly offered her own extra wool wrap to an elderly porter who was shivering near the doorway. She did not pretend that her life of practical survival had magically changed into a grand artistic career, and she did not force a bright, cheerful expression to hide the genuine heaviness she still carried inside. Instead, she simply chose to sit quietly with the uncertainty of the storm, pausing before she allowed the next wave of resentment to take over her mind, and stopping the old habit of treating every frustrated thought as an absolute truth. She remained grounded within the solid boundaries of her own physical form, recognizing that her inner vessel could remain perfectly spacious and resonant, even when the outer environment required her to remain silent in the shade. The structural density of the hollow culm is never diminished by the seasons it spends waiting in the dark storage barn, for the deep fibers know how to hold their potential until the air is clear. The deep emotional patterns that exhaust us at night are often born from a fundamental misunderstanding of how internal balance operates. When we lie awake in the dark, the mind frequently engages in a frantic effort to manage the past, attempting to fix historic junctions that have long since set in the stone of reality. We employ an inner mechanism of hypervigilance, treating the existence of a quiet season or an unfulfilled calling as an emergency that must be solved before we are allowed to rest. This constant surveying of our memories is a hidden attempt to manufacture safety out of absolute certainty. We mistakenly believe that if we can perform perfectly enough in our thoughts, we can avoid the discomfort of our current limits entirely. We begin to look at our actual, unadorned life as a kind of punishment, using internal shame to chide the heart whenever it wishes to simply occupy its own ground. Buddhist wisdom looks at this internal friction and offers a clear, liberating perspective on human discomfort. There is a fundamental distinction between the weight that naturally belongs to an event and the extra weight we manufacture through our resistance to the present. The initial friction of a difficult outcome or a routine obligation is like the natural texture of raw, unpeeled bamboo bark, coarse and unrefined to the touch. The real suffering begins when we try to pull the fibers apart with our thoughts, attempting to force our awareness completely into an imagined timeline, so that no presence remains for the life we actually have. We turn a normal turn of events into a deep personal fracture by treating every unchosen path as a direct proof of our unworthiness. True peace does not come from erasing the quiet seasons from our personal history, but from changing how we hold our balance when the internal space feels empty. Consider the physics of a small piece of natural beeswax working in the silence of the drying loft. The tool does not protect the structural hollow by locking its shape into a rigid, immovable line against the cold wood grain. If the worker were to press the material down with total crushing force, the sudden friction would simply warp the internal surface, causing the entire resonance to come to a painful halt. The mechanism remains functional precisely because it allows the softening to exist, letting the heavy, changing requirements adjust themselves without becoming a permanent distortion of the center alignment. When we refuse to allow our current reality to be exactly what it is, we are acting like a blocked air node, resisting the movement of the draft and wondering why our spirit feels so strained. To alter your relationship with this emotional tension is to realize that an unexpressed voice is not a definition of your limits, but a form of historical clarity. You do not need to convert every administrative year into a debt that must be paid by your nervous system until mourning the labor occurred. But your habit of over-rehearsing creates a continuous echo that strains the chest. By standing firmly within the clean perimeter of your current frame, you allow the phantom timelines to drop away without leaving a mark on your value. The structural integrity of your life does not require you to balance the ghost weights of an alternate artistic career path. Bringing this architecture down into the small, practical exchanges of tomorrow completely alters the physics of your awareness. It allows you to meet the demands of the modern world with an unshakable sense of place, knowing that your ultimate responsibility is to preserve the space where your own presence can breathe. The pattern of converting an old routine into a permanent identity is a defense mechanism developed by an exhausted intellect. We weave the story of our unexpressed talent so tightly into our daily interactions that the narrative itself becomes a heavy garment we refuse to take off. Even when the daily work is perfectly done, we begin to fear the very idea of a simple, unadorned chamber, believing that if we stop guarding our creative status, we will instantly become entirely worthless. Yet the teaching of the seasoned wood shows that the true protection of the heart is not its public distinctiveness or its performance, but its capacity to remain spacious under the heavy frost of life. You are not the tedious manifest that took place in the office, nor are you the judgment of those who look only at visible output. You are the continuous, open awareness that contains both the raw stalk and the silent potential of the song. If it feels right, let your attention expand past the narrow boundary of the immediate project you have been trying to realize since dusk. You might notice how the darkness does not ask you to provide a certificate of extraordinary success before it allows the nervous system to settle. The space in your room is completely empty of expectations, holding your physical weight with a steady, unblinking presence that asks for no defense. Let the need to be vindicated by the past drop away into the shadows of the floorboards, leaving you completely clear, unshared, and grounded in the quiet reality of this sleeping frame. This architecture of the seasoned bamboo frame lands with grounding clarity when you find yourself sitting in the modern glare of a glowing digital display, watching for a specific text notification that refuses to arrive. You might notice the hand moving automatically to grasp the device, refreshing the interface for reassurance like an apprentice frantically scraping the outside skin of a branch to force a sudden sound, instead of letting the timber mature in the deep shade. We spend our afternoons smiling through modern conversations while carrying a deep, heavy depletion in the gut, pretending that our internal chamber is completely dense, unyielding, and untouched by the routine boredom of the office. When the late night finally arrives, we lie down under the weight of an invisible timeline, comparing our slow, quiet seasoning with the loud, curated lives of peers we have never actually met. The internal critic begins to declare that your creative capacity has failed completely, spinning a long narrative that demands you earn the right to rest through a constant execution of practical chores. The actual implementation of this wisdom does not require a sudden departure to a quiet valley workshop, as it unfolds within the small, ordinary breaks of a chaotic afternoon. It begins when you allow a single second of physical stillness to exist between a routine administrative demand and the voice that rises up to carry the entire blame. When a wave of anxiety arrives to tell you that you must fix a relationship you cannot control, you can notice the pattern without immediately twisting your entire framework to absorb the cold frost. You can care deeply about the individuals in your immediate circle, without attempting to clamp down tightly on the exact movement of their internal weather. Resting is not a special reward that must be purchased with an unblemished record of constant professional distinctiveness, as the frame is permitted to stand quiet in the dark simply because the sun has dropped below the ridge. We often treat our internal feelings of guilt as a strict blueprint, running to adjust our posture the moment a critical thought echoes through the chest. A more resilient way is to let the memory of the daily routine pass through the open spaces of your awareness, without deciding that the current timber has suffered a fatal crack. You might observe the thought, feel its coarse, raw bark texture against your mind, and then choose to leave it sitting separate from your sense of worth. This is the practical art of modern, self-contained living, an unhurried decision to stop filling the healthy intervals of your days with the fragile mortar of constant performance. You can allow the open gaps in your creative history to remain completely empty, letting the daily pressure pass clean through without declaring the center broken beyond repair. And now, the external world can finally recede behind the clean, dry boards of your own secure sanctuary. The dark room around you requires no performance, no public accolades, and no explanations for the clear boundary your spirit has chosen to draw tonight. The modern world may continue to demand a smooth, specialized presentation, but the night recognizes the profound beauty of your unadorned presence. By ceasing the frantic effort to polish away your history, you allow the deep lines of your ordinary experiences to hold the frame together without tension. You are left entirely with your own essential presence, a solid and uncomplicated form that needs no external validation to be whole. Let the need to be verified by the marketplace slide away into the shadows of the floorboards, leaving your personal space completely clear, unshared, and at peace. Your breathing continues its slow, unsteered movement, a calm tide that honors the natural boundaries of the body without any interference from the conscious mind. It enters as a cool guest, fills the interior chambers with a steady presence, and then departs completely, leaving no lingering attachment behind. If it feels right, allow your consciousness to match this fluid process, letting the memories of the day's interactions pass out through the perimeter of your awareness without trying to hold their outlines. The files you sorted, the records you updated, and the words you spoke have all found their own places in the landscape of the past, requiring no further editing from your tired thoughts. The night has officially closed the ledger of your utility, drawing a clear, dark line between the duties of the sun and the sanctuary of the midnight hour. You might notice how the weight of the legs and the lower spine begins to flatten completely, surrendering their form to the total security of the surface below. There is no longer any need to keep the fingers flexed for the next task, and there is no obligation to hold the eyes open to monitor the horizon for potential threats. The machinery of your analytical mind is allowed to unhook its cogs, letting the heavy iron weights drop gently into the dark soil beneath the room. The space inside your skin belongs exclusively to your own rest, a sovereign territory that cannot be taxed by the demands of the town or evaluated by the standards of the crowd. As the internal speed continues to match the quiet cadence of the winter snow, you step entirely out of the race, returning to the humble, unyielding foundation that has always held your name in the dark. The dark coordinates of the room have dissolved into a deep, unmeasured shadow, softening every boundary until the space around you feels vast and clear. Let the surface beneath you receive the full density of your frame tonight. As your limbs grow heavy and the center of your gravity settles firmly into the quiet mattress, the mind has no further structures to build and no further metrics to count before the morning light touches the valley village. The curved steel scraper blade has been laid aside on the flat clay bench, cool and still, requiring no further verification from your fingers. With each slow movement of your chest, the air passes softly through the throat, returning to the open dark without any deliberate effort from your frame. The winter snow outside has turned into a quiet whisper, passing cleanly through the valley fields without meeting any resistance. You can feel the breath becoming a natural, unowned tide, a gentle rising and falling that requires no steering from your will. It is the simple weight of the universe itself, resting securely within the parameters of the evening. Every ordinary strand of your history is settling deep into the dark earth, leaving your hands empty and your posture light, resting softly against the fabric of the night. You do not need to figure out how to arrange the pieces of tomorrow, and you do not need to dissolve your edges to maintain the production of the world. The darkness itself is your sanctuary, a place where the specialized roles and the quiet seasons are held with the exact same unyielding support. Let the final images of the low-loft workshop and the mountain storage barn fade away into the featureless blackness of sleep. The dark chunk of natural beeswax is resting. The tools are laid down, and the core chamber stands perfectly set on its own center without demanding to be smoothed away. You are returning to the deep, unblended home of your own individual presence, a space that was never compromised, never eroded, and never lost. The night is wide, the room is still, and you are completely free to leave the world outside your perimeter. Let your awareness slide effortlessly into the dark, warm currents of rest, drifting deeper and deeper into the uncomplicated peace of an undisturbed sleep. The silence that fills these openings does not weaken your foundation, as it provides the very room required for the spirit to adjust its weight without friction. We spend our days running from the spaces between things, rushing to plug every silence with a modern justification or an anxious performance. Yet the deep architecture of the night reveals that the spaces are not empty voids waiting to be feared, but natural intervals of pure restoration. The mind does not need to cement itself to every passing expectation to be valuable, for a single unpeeled branch is perfectly complete, simply by resting in the shade where it grew. Let the heavy demand for continuous production slip away into the shadows of the floorboards, leaving your personal space completely clear, unshared, and at peace. Your breathing continues its slow, unsteered movement, a calm tide that honors the natural boundaries of the body without any interference from the conscious mind. It enters as a cool guest, fills the interior chambers with a steady presence, and then departs completely, leaving no lingering attachment behind. If it feels right, allow your consciousness to match this fluid process, letting the memories of the day's interactions pass out through the perimeter of your awareness without trying to hold their outlines. The files you sorted, the manifests you checked, and the words you spoke have all found their own places in the landscape of the past, requiring no further editing from your tired thoughts. The night has officially closed the ledger of your utility, drawing a clear, dark line between the duties of the sun and the sanctuary of the midnight hour. We often function under the heavy misconception that to be valuable, we must allow our own ground to be entirely flooded by the specialized demands of others. We become like the mountain ridges during a heavy winter blizzard, absorbing every drop of ice until the timber turns brittle and can no longer support the weight of the snow. The wisdom of the hollow wood reminds us that true integrity is an act of internal space, not an act of forced completion. By remaining steady within the clear parameters of your own physical form, you offer the world a reliable anchor rather than a collapsing surface. You do not need to feel guilty for keeping your inner spaces empty, for it is only within a seasoned vessel that a true voice can ever be safely contained. Let the weight of your head sink a fraction deeper into the fabric beneath it, allowing the remaining tightness in the neck and upper back to completely unwind. The long muscles of the limbs are growing heavier with every passing breath, surrendering their posture to the absolute security of the bed. Every point where your body meets the surface below is a clean boundary, a physical reminder that you are a distinct, precious form resting safely within your own territory. The space outside your walls belongs entirely to the night, and you have no obligation to police its winds or manage its changing temperatures. The world is fully capable of spinning through the dark without your vigilant watch, holding its communities and its valleys in a state of unhurried balance while you reset. The modern anxieties that felt so solid during the afternoon, the unresolved messages, the comparisons, the persistent fear of falling behind, are now revealed to be nothing more than light wood dust floating through the entryway. They possess no independent power to crack your foundation, and they only become heavy when you try to grasp them and hold them against your chest. Let the stream of your awareness move with a slow, hypnotic rhythm, allowing all the unnecessary debris of the day to fall through the open ceiling onto the earth below. The clean, seasoned fibers of your true being remain safely inside the storage barn, untouched by the moisture that passes through the rafters. You are left entirely with your own essential presence, a solid and uncomplicated form that needs no external validation to be whole. The quietness of this hour is a total sanctuary of non-doing, a vast and peaceful expanse where the passage of minutes has lost its sharp necessity. The sunrise is still a distant reality, hidden behind the dark rim of the mountain ridge, leaving these hours exclusively for the recovery of your spirit. There is no problem that must be solved before your eyes can close, and there is no relationship that must be perfectly aligned before you are permitted to drift away. You are free to let the tools drop from your hands, to let the iron blade rest on the table, and to allow your consciousness to sink into the deep, dark spaces between the moments. Allow the final remnants of intentional thought to thin out like the last traces of frost clearing from the heavy cedar chest in the midnight air. The air is still, the valley is silent, and the finished, unplayed flute rests perfectly balanced on its dark silk cloth. Enduring the dark without a single drop of hesitation, you are sinking deeper now, moving past the realm of social obligation, past the need for language, and past the boundaries of the historical self. There is only this immediate, unhurried breath, this profound density of the resting frame, and this complete surrender to the dark, healing current of the evening. Let the quiet darkness carry you all the way down into the deep, unmeasured peace of an undisturbed sleep. If the seasoned timber discovers its voice only by remaining hollow in the shade, why do you still look to fill your quietest years with the heavy noise of the world? The question hangs quietly in the cool air of the drying loft, leaving no ripple on the vast silence that has settled around your resting form. There is no requirement to answer the intellect tonight, and no obligation to trace the origin of your professional doubts before your eyes are allowed to close. The unpeeled bark of the bamboo does not defend its simple texture to the rafters, nor does it apologize to the valley for being plain and silent in the shade. It simply rests in its designated place, locked securely within the heavy embrace of the shelter, completely at peace with the weight it holds in the dark. Observe how the cool evening air moves through the center of the chest, traveling with a slow, organic cadence that requires absolutely no management from your thoughts. The breath does not keep track of your daily tasks. It does not evaluate your creative output, and it does not rush to complete its path to prove its efficiency to the world. It enters as a quiet, unearned guest, filling the interior chambers with a steady presence, and then departs softly into the dark, leaving your boundaries completely intact and unblemished. If it feels right, allow your awareness to match this uncalculated existence, letting the heavy habit of intellectual validation coast to a total, peaceful halt. The memories of the monotonous columns, the practical responsibilities, and the administrative friction you collected since dawn are losing their density now, softening like light wood dust floating down to the earth. They hold no independent authority to compress your ribs. They possess no power to keep your nervous system on guard, and they cannot warp the profound grounding that has claimed your physical body. You can feel the immense, comforting weight of the hips, the total relaxation of the lower jaw, and the complete release of the fingers as they rest open against the fabric of the bed. Every point where your frame meets the surface below is a steady reassurance from the earth that your immediate environment is secure, your sanctuary is private, and you are fully permitted to drop the role of the worker tonight. We often function under the heavy misconception that our true value must be manufactured through continuous, extraordinary achievements, turning each ordinary task into a source of personal shame if it does not bring grand recognition. Yet the wisdom of the low workshop reminds us that the highest dignity lives not in the specialized title, but in the capacity to bring an undivided presence to the plainest row of life. Your essential nature is not the exhaustion, the unfulfillment, or the expectations that the intellect keeps replaying in the dark. You are the vast, unblinking space that witnesses these passing loops, remaining completely whole, resilient, and undisturbed beneath the surface noise of the marketplace. The world may demand a constant display of specialized utility, but the inner grain remains steady, deep, and entirely at peace. Let this quiet recognition settle deep into the marrow of your bones, operating not as a complex calculation to be tracked, but as a heavy, soothing gravity that invites your entire being to rest. There is no need to hold on to these reflections, no requirement to remember these descriptions, and no obligation to maintain any focus as the midnight hour deepens. The spoken lines are simply quiet wooden markers along the edge of your space, blending into the natural background noise of the night like the soft fall of snow moving through the dark valley foliage. You can permit the words to dissolve into a formless, gentle murmur, a regular cadence that softly nudges your consciousness further down into the warm, dark currents of deep rest. The room around you has become an absolute sanctuary of non-doing, a vast expanse where the pressure to justify your identity has been completely cleared from the air. The morning is far away, resting behind the dark silhouette of the mountain ridge, leaving these hours entirely dedicated to the profound recovery of your spirit. You do not need to solve the riddle of your career tonight, and you do not need to guarantee that your creative voice is perfectly realized before you are permitted to drift away. The universe is fully capable of managing its own heavy cycles without your active intervention, holding the fields, the cliffs, and the quiet mountain storage barns in a state of effortless equilibrium while you sleep. Allow the final remnants of intentional thought to drift away like the last thin wisps of evening mist clearing from the weathered timber beams. The air is flat, the sky is dark, and the open frame requires no effort to let the quiet night air pass cleanly through its center. You are sinking deeper now, moving past the realm of memory, past the need for control, and past the heavy boundaries of the automated self. There is only this immediate, unhurried breath, this profound heaviness of the limbs, and this complete surrender to the dark, healing sanctuary of the midnight hour. Let the quiet darkness carry you all the way down into the deep, unmeasured peace of an undisturbed sleep. The vast expanse of this quiet night continues to widen its perimeter around your bed, filling the dark corners of the room with a deep, unyielding safety that requires no effort from your mind to maintain. The intellect has spent so many seasons acting as a restless merchant, constantly measuring the value of your days by the amount of visible work you have managed to produce for the town. Yet the immense silence of this winter hour gently reveals that your actual existence requires no external validation to be completely authentic and complete. In this soft sanctuary of the evening, there is no ledger being monitored, no registry of achievements to present, and no creative deadlines to satisfy before you are fully permitted to drop your weight into the mattress. The darkness does not keep a record of your unexpressed talents, nor does it judge your spirit for spending its daylight hours handling the necessary, ordinary duties of survival. It simply offers an open, dark room where your tired frame can rest without any condition or expectation. Observe how the cool evening air claims its own natural territory within the center of the chest, moving with a regular, unforced rhythm that mimics the slow, settling of frost on the high cliffs outside. The breath does not worry about the years you spent executing simple chores. It does not calculate the songs you never had the clearance to write, and it never accelerates its cadence to prove its utility to an invisible crowd. It arrives as a clean, peaceful gift, filling the internal hollows of the body with presence, and then returns quietly to the surrounding room without leaving a single trace of struggle behind. If it feels right, allow your awareness to slide into this same uncomplicated state, leaving the frantic need to fix your creative timeline to fade completely into the shadows of the floorboards. The day has closed its registers, and the tools of production are laid down, leaving you with absolutely nothing to balance, nothing to justify, and nothing to defend before the dawn arrives. The thoughts that once felt like heavy wood blockages pressing against the back of your throat are now losing their density, drifting away like thin, dry shavings carried out of the workshop by a passing breeze. They carry no independent weight, they hold no authority to disrupt your peace, and they cannot alter the deep, solid alignment that has taken claims on your physical form. You can feel the heavy, comforting presence of the legs, the total relaxation of the lower back, and the soft curling of the fingers as they rest completely unburdened by the fabric of the bed. Every point where your body meets the surface below is an unmoving foundation, a direct reassurance from the earth that your private perimeter is secure, your sanctuary is real, and you are fully permitted to let go of the vigil tonight. We often live under the persistent illusion that our inner wholeness must be constantly manufactured through public performance, believing that if we stop striving for artistic distinction, our presence will become completely invisible and lost. Yet the wisdom of the low-drying lofts points to a far deeper truth, the realization that the internal chamber does not lose its value simply because it rests in the complete shade for a season. Your true nature is not the collection of regrets, anxieties, or professional friction that the mind keeps trying to rearrange in the dark. You are the vast open awareness that holds both the quiet waiting and the eventual melody, remaining perfectly resilient, unbroken, and calm beneath the changing demands of the world. The cold wind may pass through the rafters of the barn, but it can never diminish the essential density of the seasoned wood that remains safely sheltered inside. Let this understanding settle deep into the marrow of your bones, operating not as a complex philosophy to be solved, but as a heavy, soothing gravity that invites your entire being to soften into the dark. There is no need to hold on to this realization, no requirement to remember these descriptions, and no obligation to maintain any focus as the midnight hour deepens. The spoken cadences are simply quiet markers along the edge of your space, a gentle current through the winter air that asks for no analytical work from a tired mind. You can permit the words to dissolve into a formless, regular murmur, a soothing rhythm that gently carries your consciousness further down into the warm, dark currents of deep rest. The room around you has become an absolute sanctuary of non-doing, a space where the passage of time has lost its sharp necessity and its constant pressure to produce. The morning is far away, resting behind a dark ridge that has not yet begun to turn toward the sun, leaving these hours entirely dedicated to the quiet restoration of your spirit. You do not need to resolve the unfulfilled potential of your life tonight, and you do not need to guarantee that your creative voice is perfectly vindicated before your eyes close. The universe is fully capable of maintaining its cycles without your active supervision, holding the mountains, the valleys, and the quiet storage sheds in a state of effortless equilibrium while you sleep. Allow the final remnants of intentional thought to drift away like the last thin wisps of cold mist dissolving over the snow-covered paths of the high ridges. The landscape is still, the sky is dark, and the open vessel of your being requires no effort to remain perfectly aligned with the silence of the evening. You are sinking deeper now, moving past the realm of memory, past the need for language, and past the heavy boundaries of the historical self. There is only this immediate unhurried breath, this profound heaviness of the limbs, and this complete surrender to the dark, healing sanctuary of the midnight hour. Let the quiet darkness carry you all the way down into the deep, unmeasured peace of an undisturbed sleep.